welcome to Rising. Happy Monday. It's a big day for my Michigan Wolverines. I don't know if you know, it's the championship game. Very excited. I broke out an old college t-shirt that I plan to wear tonight. So I'm getting into the spirit.
And who are you playing?
Washington.
For
the National College Championships.
Okay, yeah. I'll vote for the Midwest team over the Washington team as a Buckeye myself.
We are honored to have your support. We can be united in this way, finally.
In this way.
Viewers would not be surprised that we have a Michigan Buckeye rivalry as well as everything else.
Yeah, sure, of course.
All right, well, let's get to our first story. Senior Pentagon leadership, Biden administration officials, and members of Congress were unaware for days that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin was hospitalized, including briefly in the ICU. Now, Austin first entered the hospital a week ago on New Year's Day for yet undisclosed illness. He remains hospitalized as of this taping. Per anonymous administration officials, the Pentagon did not inform the White House National Security Council or top advisor Jake Sullivan of Austin's hospitalization until Thursday, a snafu that will likely cause, quote, heads to roll, one DoD official told Politico. Meanwhile, overseas, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is continuing his diplomacy tour of the Middle East as U.S. officials attempt to de-escalate growing tensions in the region. Per the Washington Post, an American intelligence assessment found that it would be difficult for Israel to succeed in a war against Hezbollah amid ongoing fighting in Gaza.
Meanwhile, over the weekend, Israel killed 2 journalists after striking the vehicle they were traveling in, including the son of Wael Dahdouh, Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief. Since October 7th, Dahdouh says he lost his home, wife, and 3 of his children in Israeli bombings. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was confronted on the journalists' deaths. Let's watch.
110 journalists being targeted by the IDF, including our colleague, son of our colleague, Mahmoud Wael Dahdouh, Hamza Wael Dahdouh. Is the United States condemn targeting journalists?
I am deeply sorry for the almost unimaginable loss suffered by your colleague, Wael Dahdouh. I'm a parent myself. I can't begin to imagine the horror that he's experienced, not once, but now twice. This is an unimaginable tragedy, and that's also been the case for, as I said, far too many.
Now, his response there has been characterized as a failure to condemn. Offering condolences as a parent is a very different thing than looking at the structural issue here. Notably, I believe about 18 journalists were killed in the course of the almost 2-year war now in Ukraine, and they were given an honorary journalism award as a way to recognize their sacrifice. Now, in just 3 months of a siege in Gaza, over 100 journalists have been killed. And this is, again, we're talking about a journalist being killed who is the son of the head of the Al Jazeera news bureau, who has already suffered unfathomable tragedies. He has already lost his wife, other children, and an infant grandson in these attacks. And increasingly, there are accusations that these members of the press are being targeted. Gazan journalists are now saying that they believe their blue flak jackets are a target, turn them into targets, as opposed to being an identifier that's supposed to make them more safe in the context of the fighting. And so again, there's this question of whether or not, instead of just giving thoughts and prayers and condolences, whether there will be any consequences or at least an investigation into whether or not the accusations that Israel is in fact targeting journalists are true.
Sure, and it's unimaginable, that level of loss, to lose that many members of your family. I should just report that the IDF has said that also in the car was a terrorist who was operating a drone, and that was the reason for the strike. So certainly further clarification is needed. If it was a legitimate target, if there was a terrorist also in the car, I suppose. But I know a lot of people probably won't take what the IDF has to say about it automatically, nor should they, so further investigation seems merited to me.
I mean, at what point, even taking this most recent tragedy to the side, certainly it seems implausible that I believe it's 104 journalists now that have been killed in Gaza, a relatively small geographic area, seeing four times, 5-6 times as many deaths of journalists than the war zone in Ukraine has seen in the last 2 years. At a certain point, it becomes implausible to believe that every one of those journalists just happened to be sitting next to a terrorist when they were killed by IDF bombing. Would you expect at this time there would have been some kind of investigation or stronger pushback from the United States on Israel, given how much we purport to value and want to protect press freedoms, and given how many, the overwhelming bulk of the weapons that are being dropped on Gaza are actually being provided by the United States?
Of course, journalists should not be deliberately targeted. I don't have the relevant information to determine which of these strikes were legitimate and which were not. Journalists just being targeted because no one should be targeted unless they are literally a member of Hamas or are working with Hamas or are embedded with Hamas, and then they become a legitimate target. But I don't know if that was the case here, and it does merit further investigation. It looks like we're going to be talking with the author of a piece about this for The Intercept later in the show today. So we should leave that one there. What do you make of this Lloyd Austin news? It seems kind of like a very unforced error. Like, why wouldn't he just inform people what was going on? His deputy thought he was on vacation, and that's why she was taking over. So it seems like it was hushed up for no reason, and is just going to lead to people being in trouble, including possibly him. He might have to resign as a wake of this, and I don't understand why would you get yourself into this situation.
I mean, one can only imagine that the reason you would choose not to let people know that you were incommunicado, that you were going to be in major surgery, was that you wouldn't want to delegate authority to somebody else, because that's your natural implication, right? Just because you're sick and in the hospital doesn't mean you're fired from your job. It doesn't mean that you're subject to anything more than a temporary suspension of your duties. But what is going on where he wouldn't want to simply delegate authority temporarily to whoever is next in the chain of command? Can some inference be drawn about a lack of confidence in other people who are around? Is there something sensitive, particularly sensitive, about the geopolitical moment that made him not want to release the reins or allow other people to have insight into the kinds of actions he's overseeing right now? I do think it raises a lot of bizarre questions that, to your point, would not have come up if he had simply said, hey, I need to go on sick leave, someone needs to take over for a week or two.
Right. It sounds like it was unanticipated, that it was a complication from surgery necessitating additional medical intervention, but that it was somewhat serious, and he was going under the knife, and he was going to be incapacitated and not able to process intelligence and react to things real time. I mean, we have a enormous federal bureaucracy, intelligence, defense infrastructure. The idea that it all comes to a standstill because one person is under surgery doesn't make any sense. Like, you should be able to delegate to other people. I mean, what are we paying all these other people for if you can't, hand over the reins in a moment of a personal medical situation? So it's very weird, and likely he's going to be in a lot of trouble for it. But we'll see if we see one of the first departures from the Biden cabinet, which has held remarkably solid all the way through.
Well, it's worth noting Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason reported that POTUS is not so far considering firing Defense Secretary Austin. That's as of just about an hour ago. We'll keep you updated if anything changes. Stick around. I'll let you know what's on my radar next.